Actually, that was quicker than I even anticipated. Ladies and gentlemen, we are officially live on Facebook. We are here and ready to go, starting another episode of Wisdom Wednesday in the Home for the Holidays series. Guys, we are so excited to be here just before the Christmas holiday break. I know everyone is looking forward to that eggnog and the gingerbread cookies and the gingerbread house. I know everyone is looking forward to that, but we are here today home for the holidays on episode 2 of our Appraiser. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Letitia Grant. I am the national chair of House Then the Car.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, we are in the holiday spirit. My name is Stephanie Milburn. I am the campaign manager for House in the Car, and we are joined by none other than Miss LaTanya Donaldson of Prime Lending.
Well, good afternoon, ladies. It is certainly a pleasure to see you. And yes, I mean, the spirit is just surrounding us right now. Love, love, love the candy canes. And ladies, I am so glad to be here. LaTanya Donaldson, Director of Multicultural Lending, who yet co-sponsor once again with House in the Car. Ladies, I am too impressed with you. I happened to look on Facebook the other day. They're on a plane jetting out to hit the slopes. And here you sit before me. I'm too impressed.
Yes, that shows you our level of commitment to House in the Car.
Absolutely, absolutely. Although we did enjoy the snow, we were too excited to come back and talk about appraisal. So our show today is in the hands of the appraiser. And today our appraiser is Mr. J. Joseph. So Mr. J. Joseph of Joseph Appraisals Group was established in 2003 by J. Joseph, who is the owner and active working appraiser. Jay is a certified residential appraiser with over 28 years of experience. His area of expertise is in appraising custom and unique homes. He is certified in the valuation of green sustainable buildings. Jay was a founder of Value Trend Solutions and currently a chief of review appraiser for Apex Appraisal Management Company. Jay is also a licensed real estate broker as well as an instructor for the Department of Real Estate and teaches a CE class. So guys, please get your virtual hands together and join us in welcoming Mr. J. Joseph to our virtual stage.
It's really nice to be here. You guys, this seems like this is going to be fun. So thank you for having me.
Of course, Jay, we wouldn't have it any other way. We're definitely going to make this fun for you today. But here's where I want to go back because I did not get a hold of the bio before the episode today, and I just heard that you specialize in custom and unique homes. So that is going to be exciting and something very exciting for us to add to that's going to be something exciting for us to add to the conversation today. So I'm looking forward to adding that in to what we've already slated to discuss today.
So I will tell my audience, get your pen and paper ready today.
Oh, so today you tell them to get their pen and paper ready.
I'm just reminding them. I know my audience, they're always ready. But today, you know what? We've been kind of dabbling a little bit about appraisals, and I know they've been excited to hear about this one.
Yeah. Well, here's where I want to start, Jay. And I want you to tell our audience, what is the difference between an appraiser and an inspector? Because this topic comes up all the time, and I think some people think that those two titles can be interchangeable, but they're not.
They're way different, and I'm really glad you brought this up. We are on the right track. So really often I'll get a complaint from a realtor or a homeowner that says, hey, the home inspector was here 4 hours and the appraiser was in and out of here in 20 minutes. And it's because what we do is so different. You know, home inspector is picking everything apart, inspecting everything. And by the time they leave the house, their job's done. For the appraiser, the inspection, we call it the same thing, but it's different. The inspection might only take 20 minutes and it might only be about 1/10 of the appraiser's job. We assume the big difference is where inspectors are touching and checking everything. For the most part, appraisers assume things are in working order unless it's readily apparent that they're not. Like a home inspector is going to go up on the roof, go in an attic, Generally speaking, an appraiser is not going to do that. And they'll have comments that say, you know, we're only responsible things that are clearly evident at the inspection. So it's way different. I wish when I left an inspection, I was done with an appraisal. I would make a lot more money. But the reality is I've got a long way to go. So it is confusing because we do call it inspections, but you're not going to find an appraiser tearing apart an AC unit, generally not going in an attic. And we make assumptions that things. Here, one more thing. Just here's a quick example. Like on a roof, like on a flat roof, a home inspector is going to go up and look at that roof and look for problems, right? The appraiser is going to look at the ceiling, and if we see ceilings collapsing or we see water damage, then we might say, hey, the roof might be bad. We want to call for another inspection. But if everything looks fine from the inside and the ceiling doesn't look bad and there's no clear water damage, we're going to make the assumption that the roof is fine. So hopefully that kind of clarifies things.
Mhm.
Now tell us, Jay, tell our audience, please, as an appraiser, what is your main objective?
My main objective for sure is to, at the end of it all, is to say what we think the house is worth. What's our opinion of value? Again, we have responsibilities. Like if there are readily apparent defects associated with the property that impact the health and safety or the soundness of the structure, it's our job to point those things out and require those items to be repaired. And that's because we're the eyes and ears of the lender. And lenders have guidelines, and lenders say, hey, we don't want to loan on a house where there's severe water damage. And if somebody moved in, there's, a chance that they could get sick from mold behind some drywall. So we want to protect the lender's interests, but the main goal is at the end of it to say what we think the house is worth, and to make sure that that conclusion is supported. There's certainly misconceptions that appraisers just kind of go, it's worth $450,000. That's what it's worth. And that's not, we're responsible to have a methodology that we adhere to and that our conclusions are supported by market information.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was going to say, Jay, in addition to protecting the lender and the lender's interest, also comes the buyer, right? So
Right.
if I'm saying that I'm trying to buy this house for $400,000, I need to know that it's worth that.
Yeah, that's super. It's a great point. I'm a VA appraiser also, and that's one of the things that VA stresses. Like if you ask them what our purpose is, it's to protect the veteran, to make sure the veteran's paying a fair price, that they're not getting a house that's got significant defects to it. So yeah, you're absolutely right in that regard.
Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause right here so that we can ask our audience to draw a line down the middle of their paper. Inspector versus appraiser. Inspectors looking for problems. Appraiser is there to assess value. And again, as Jay stated, he may not be in your home. He may be there for a good 20 minutes in and out. But basically, he's going in there to determine, looking for value, and if there are anything that is going to prevent the house from being livable and sustainable. I mean, number one, and then number two, just to make sure that there is a house, right? Because I remember when I first got into this business, it may not actually be a house because we had all these drive-by appraisals.
And that's a good point. That's right.
Fair. That's fair.
One of the things, Letitia, you just said, you said he may not be in there, but he or she may only be in that home for 20 minutes. Jay, I think it's important right now. Okay, so obviously there's more than 20 minutes that you put into this. I think what a lot of people don't understand, you've done a whole lot of homework before you arrive at that house.
Yeah, so that's my process. If you want, I'll just take you through it for a few minutes. I put probably about half hour into research beforehand. Before I get out to the property, I kind of cover all my bases to say, okay, I want the best data in the immediate subdivision. Then I want to expand it to what I think the neighborhood is. And then if there's things I think that are going to be unique about the house, maybe there's an owned solar system, or maybe it backs a busy street or backs a golf course, I'll do separate searches to find comps that meet those guidelines. So I want to be well prepared when I go out there. I'm not concluding a value ahead of time. I just want to have a bunch of information available to me. Then I go and look at the house. I take my notes. I measure the property. That's important. I shouldn't be going by what the county says the square footage is. I should be confirming that myself. There's some appraisers that are lazy and are not doing that, which drives me nuts. Then I go back out to my car, and now I'm trying to find the best sales. Okay. I usually shoot pictures of about 10 comps, 10 different properties that I think I might consider for my report. Then I drive by and I want to make sure I take notes on the things I can look at, my observations about the neighborhood. After I gather all that information, then I can go back and start writing the report. I would say start to finish on a typical house, an appraiser might put about 5-6 hours of work into it before they sign their name to a value.
Jay, I do have one question because you said that you will also take measurements. Now, and I've often had a conversation with many of my clients about that itself, measurements and measuring a home. And one of the conclusions that I've come to is that measurements are taken differently depending on who's doing the measurements or who's measuring the property.
Right.
Can you kind of give us an idea of what an appraiser does when they're measuring, and what do they take out or put in for measuring a property?
Really good question. So different appraisers use different tools for measuring. I think the laser is the best way to do it. But I'm one of the few appraisers that I have a laser, and then I also have a 100-foot tape measure. Sometimes it's hard to bounce a laser off certain walls, so I'll bring both. I would be a little nervous if an appraiser shows up with one of those wheels. I don't know how you can say that those are accurate. Like, there are appraisers that just show up with their wheels and they wheel around the house. That's a little alarming to me. So my methodology, unless it's a condominium, is I measure the outside walls and then I subtract things that aren't livable, like a garage, like an atrium in the middle, or a storage room that you access from the exterior. I'll subtract those things. And that's how I'll come up with my measurements. The upstairs, we don't count the stairs, the interior stairs, twice. So I'll give them credit for the stairs on the first floor, and my second floor starts at the top of the stairs. Okay, and so then I'll measure the upstairs separately. So that's kind of my process, mostly with laser, but again, I'll have a tape measure also.
So I have a question regarding square footage, because Letitia and Stephanie, we kind of talked about this on the call last week when we talked about ways of improving your value. And we specifically mentioned like a structure being built in addition to your home. For instance, okay, I'm a great example. I live in a very rural area. So it's very common to come through my neighborhood and see like detached garages that may have an additional room. We have mother-in-law suites. So if I were to go outside in my backyard and add an additional dwelling, what that doesn't really count into my square footage, but what does that do for my value?
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. Generally speaking, additions to the house itself will bring, if they're done well and they're functional, they don't compromise the integrity of the original floor plan, that is the best way to add value if you're adding square footage, because the appraiser will count that as part of the house. So if you were going to add a guest house, generally speaking, most appraisers would say the guest house has a little bit less functional utility. And so what I mean by that is when we make an adjustment in an appraisal, we're trying to mirror what we think the typical buyer would do. Does that make sense? Like if you're looking at an adjustment on the appraisal for pool, if that appraiser makes a $15,000 adjustment for a pool, what they're saying is they think a typical buyer in this neighborhood, this price range, this time period would pay about $15,000 for the pool. So when you talk about something like a guest house, to the typical buyer, that guest house has a little bit less functional utility, fewer uses, if that makes sense. And so I understand that on a particular property in a particular neighborhood, there are some buyers that are going to say, I need a guest house. I have elderly parents that I want to be able
Mother-in-law.
to put in there, a mother-in-law. I have a kid who plays the drums. I have a kid with a pot problem and I don't want him in the main house, whatever the case may be. So I know there are some people specifically that need a guest house for whatever reason, but that doesn't really fit the criteria for a typical buyer. I also know there might be some buyers that have no use for a guest house at all. So we kind of eliminate both of those people and we say, okay, the typical buyer likes a guest house, but likes it a little bit less and will use it less than the main house. So we should give it less value. That's why you're better off adding square footage to the main house as opposed to adding additional structures.
Whoa, that's
point.
good to hear. Because that feeds right into our next question, which is location, location, location. We hear this all the time: location, location, location. If you were to pick this house up and place it over here, it'd be worth $100,000 more. But because we cannot literally move a house unless it's a manufactured home, what other areas outside of what you just mentioned, adding square footage onto a home, what other areas in a home improvements would you be able to give value for?
Yeah, so that's another good question. I would say that whenever you're looking at a house and you're looking to make improvements to it, you have to be very aware of the location, right? You have to be very aware of the neighborhood that you're thinking of doing something to. And the reason I say that is putting granite countertops in a nice neighborhood is more likely to return full value, full cost or more than if you put granite countertops in $100,000 neighborhood, if that makes sense. So always be really cognizant of the surroundings and what is typical for the neighborhood. I believe the formula to maximize value first, and what I mean is bring in more value than it costs to put the thing in, is cure the deficiencies. Okay. And so what I mean by that is let's figure out what's average for our neighborhood, and then let's do what we need to bring these substandards up to the area norm. So I think that's the first way to bring value. The other thing is if you have a totally remodeled kitchen, but the rest of the house isn't remodeled, then you're more likely to get more value by bringing those things up to the standards that you set in the kitchen. I'm a big believer in updating consistently. Okay, I see this way too often where somebody saves their money, they've got their $15,000, and they're like, I'm going to remodel the master bathroom because that's all I can afford to do today. That doesn't bring as much value because the appraiser doesn't usually make an adjustment just for the owner's bathroom. They have to consider the property in total. And so now you're faced with an average house with one updated component. That's not the best formula to get the greatest return. So instead of saying I have this amount of money, I can't afford to do everything, but I can afford to do this, I almost think you're best off waiting until you can do it all and you can do it consistently.
Jay, you have just made my job, Stephanie's job, and the number of realtists that are on our virtual platform right now. You have made our jobs so much more easier at this point. We preach consistency, making your home marketable, and all of those things, adding a coat of paint when the carpet needs to be replaced, all of those things that you just said are things that we've been preaching for years. So I'm so glad that you said that, Stephanie. If your audience does not have their pen and paper out, I would suggest that they go and grab it.
And Letitia,
not only that, I want to just have a recorder and say, listen to Jay.
Yeah.
Listen to me, listen to Jay.
Yeah.
He also spoke to the new home builder or new home buyer, because we talked about that last week. We go in and we sit down, and well, first of all, they get us because we walk in the model home, and we're like, oh, my house is going to look just like that. So then you go into the spec, or you start looking in there. Oh no, that's an upgrade. Oh no, that's an upgrade. Yeah. So don't upgrade yourself out of your neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's right. I just had a client, a loan officer client of mine who, and
A loan officer.
yeah, a loan officer to making, you guys are making so much money right now. He was buying the model home and his purchase price, you ready for this, was $1.9 million, which is so high in a neighborhood where the highest sale is 1.3 million. And I spent
Oh
15
no.
minutes. I'm like, you sure you want to do this? Like, you're now $600,000 higher than the highest comp.
And I promise
Like-
you that loan officer does not work for prime lending.
He's making crazy overages for sure. And I'm just
Wow.
like, look, you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be
No.
that person that over improves your house because that the second you move into it, it's not a model home anymore.
Right.
And you are at the mercy of what other houses are selling for. So yeah, you want to be really careful on those new constructions.
Yeah.
Don't be the one that spends too much on upgrades. Just get in there, and over time you can do things and you do it consistently. But upgrades tend to not return full cost in the resale market.
You know, we have our analytic buyer and then we have our emotional buyer. I would definitely place that person under the emotional buyer. And that's simply because, you know, they're not looking at all of the factors and the factors that contribute to, you know, you being able to get good resale value for your home, especially when you're at the top end. You know, we have to be very careful when we look to purchase at the very top end of the market, and we have to be very careful with upgrading ourselves outside of the market. And
Yep.
that's when people start making comments like, can we pick this house up and move it on the opposite side of the freeway? Well, absolutely, we cannot pick the house up and move it on the opposite side of the freeway. But what you can do is not put imported Italian floors in that property on that side of the freeway. You know, those are some of the things that we actually have control over. So hence that pin and pad. One other thing, Jay, that you mentioned, and I want to make sure that we touch on with our audience is, you spoke about things that prevent the home from being livable. And we just received an appraisal back that came in undervalued today. And I think every episode, I think I have one, but it came in undervalued. We kind of knew. So after this, I'm going to have to reach out to the seller. But the gas wasn't on. And it's that prevented it from being marked as is.
Yeah.
Can you talk to our audience about having an as is appraisal?
Yeah, so that's an interesting scenario for sure. So appraisers typically will appraise a property one or two ways. Mostly it's going to be as is. As the property sits today, when the appraiser is going out there, that's how they're going to come up with a value. The problem on your scenario is the gas wasn't on, and so the appraiser couldn't verify that things worked. Couldn't verify that hot water came on, couldn't verify that the stove came on or the heat came on. And I'm not going to tell you that the appraiser is going to go nuts inspecting things. But lenders often will tell us, look, if the utilities aren't on, you can't give it a clear final. And the reason is because the lender often is not okay with the assumptions we would have to make to give it an as-is value. So in your case, if we were going to give an as-is value, we would have to make assumptions about the working condition of some things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We would have to say, we can't test to make sure the heat comes on. We have to assume it comes on. We can't test to make sure the water heater works. We have to assume so. And again, the appraiser needs to consider what the client wants. And so often if I go to a house and there's no gas on, instead of me doing it as is or subject to reinspection, those are the two choices, I'll call the lender and say, look, I can do it either way. I can make the assumptions that these items work and state that I couldn't verify, or I can do it subject to. And so what you're going to have to do in your scenario, you're going to have to get the gas on, and then the appraiser is going to have to come back out. So we can do it either way. I think that the good appraisers will call the lender and say, what would you like me to do? Like I just had one the other day. It was a triplex and I couldn't get into one of the bedrooms. And normally we're supposed to take pictures of all the rooms. And so in that case, I called the lender and say, I can do this as is and assume and comment that I'm assuming that bedroom is the same condition as the other bedrooms, or you can call for a reinspection. I leave it up to them.
So, you know, we've all seen these memes, and it is The seller thinks their house is worth this. The buyer thinks their house is worth this. The agent, the realtor, has stated their house is worth, and then the appraiser comes in and finalizes it. So of course we have a seller, and in my case specifically as well, all the time we go out, we as licensed agents, as realtors, we prepare these beautiful sheets of paper, because ultimately at the end of the day they become sheets of paper with our opinion, our professional opinion of how much a house is worth. Oftentimes we unfortunately walk out of there without winning. We've lost because we work for the seller and the seller says, I see what you have on that piece of paper, but I need you to increase that by this much. We do so. In this market, though, we have a buyer that comes in and says, well, I really don't think the house is worth that dollar amount, but I'll go ahead and pay it because I need a place to stay.
Right.
They write an offer for that price. The lender gets a hold of it, does all of their due diligence, and then in comes the appraiser, who ultimately has a duty to their client, which is what Jay said. And Jay, talk to us now about, at this point, who your duty is to, who is your client, and then how often do you receive phone calls about price adjustments?
Yeah. First of all, let me comment on something. You have awesome teeth. I'm sure everyone is thinking it. I just wanted to get that out there.
Thank you.
What was the question again? So this is definitely a tough time from an appraisal perspective. And the reason it's a tough time is because appraisers are having trouble keeping up with the market. Like the reality is in the Phoenix market, we had a 5-month period where the average sales price in Maricopa County area increased 23% in 5 months. That is really hard for appraisers to keep track of. And then often what we're seeing is bidding wars. I don't know about the set markets you're in, but you have a house listed at $300,000, 6 people want it. Next thing you know, your sales price is $30,000 higher than the list price. It's really hard for appraisers to account for that. And sometimes the winner of the bidding war is actually the biggest loser because they're paying too much. So we're faced with a lot of challenges. Our tool to work in a market like this is something called time adjustments. And what a time adjustment is, and we have to agree that one of the biggest flaws of appraising is we're using historic data to say what a house is worth today, right? Like I'm using a sale that's 3 months old, and if the market's gone up like this, what do I do? Because I'm appraising it today, and the market's moving so fast. Appraisers make time adjustments. And so just take that scenario. If we're going up 1% a month, and here's today, and here's a comp that closed 3 months ago, but the meeting of the minds date was 4 months ago, my job as the appraiser is to add 4% appreciation to that comp to reconcile it to today. Again, the bigger problems are, okay, I got this. I got the 1% a month appreciation or the 2% appreciation, but then the bidding war comes in and now it's 3% appreciation. The appraiser can't justify it. So we're getting a lot of calls like what you alluded to from people that are unhappy with us. All I can do is, I think good practice, and what I teach my appraisers here is, if you're going to come in below the contract price, you owe everybody more than what you would give them otherwise. It's acknowledging that you came in below the contract price and really saying why. And here's what I considered, and this is what was provided to me by the agents, and this is why I considered this sale, but I didn't include this sale, and here's how I've accounted for the appreciation. You really want to give the parties to the transaction an understanding about the challenges we were faced with and why we didn't get up to the contract price. I think that that's good appraising. Then ultimately, Letitia, what you do is you hopefully are one of those realtors that reads the appraisals. So many just look at the number and then yell at people. Hopefully you're not that one. And you'll read that paragraph and say, hey, seller, I understand what happened here. And I met the appraiser. The appraiser was professional. I gave him all this information. There's an explanation about why they came in at their number. And I think it's pretty fair, and we need to decide what we're going to do next.
Yeah. And unfortunately, on our side, that's a conversation we don't want to have. And sometimes we know that we're going to have it, right, at listing. But that's a conversation that we don't necessarily want to have. And every time I get an appraisal that's below, I look at all of the comps that are used and make a determination on if those are comps that I actually use and that I presented to the client at the start of the transaction. And then we just kind of go from there. But oftentimes, things change while you're on the market. And unfortunately, there could be someone that came in and actually sold their home for a little less. And then that comp absolutely affects, ours.
Yeah.
So that is a different conversation that we have to have with the seller.
Yep, it totally makes sense. It's not just a tough market for me. It's certainly a tough market for you because we're dealing with moving targets right now.
Yeah.
And it just makes it tough. And at the end of the day, I understand that realtors want to get their deals closed and they want to get their commission checks, but the good realtors don't take their eye off the prize, and the prize isn't the commission check. It's doing a good job for their clients and protecting their clients. And you seem like the type of ladies that would walk away from a deal or advise their client to walk away from a deal as opposed to putting themselves in a situation that might really hurt them down the road.
And we've done it before.
Yeah.
I believe you.
They are amazing realtors.
I believe that.
Amazing. And they will definitely do that.
Absolutely.
It is about referral sources and taking care of your customer. I think when you take care of your customer and provide them with a customer service experience that they've never had before, everything else just comes together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we've been fortunate here, Stephanie and I are in the same office. We've been fortunate to grow a business based on only referrals. And that is, if I had to give anyone a tip, we're looking into doing some other things in the upcoming year. But if I had to give anyone a tip, it would not be, and I hear the old saying is treat everyone the way that you want to be treated, but you have to treat people the way that they want to be treated, and you have to treat everyone with respect, and you have to uphold integrity.
Oh my God, I love that. How they want to be treated. Now we're about to go to part 2 of this session.
And you know what? And I'm glad that you said that because that's exactly where we're going. Because
we didn't plan it, I promise.
Yeah, I know it's perfect timing because what Jay spoke about is he said that it's a difficult time for the appraisers right now during today's market. And we're getting yelled at, Jay, about the length of time that it's taking the appraisers to go out and appraise properties. So hopefully my clients, Stephanie's clients, Latanya's clients, hopefully our clients are listening. And I want them to hear from you, Jay. Can you kind of expound upon what's going on and what's preventing you from being able to return an with any of their real estate needs? So Facebook audience, sorry about that. We did drop off, but we're back to you live again. What's happening next? What's happening next? So Facebook audience, sorry about that. We did drop off, but we're back to you live again. And what I'd like to do is, Latanya, I'd like for you to give your information again to the audience so that they can contact you with any of their real estate needs.
Sure, absolutely. So I am Latanya Donaldson, and I oversee our multicultural lending department at Prime Lending. But I can be reached at L for Latanya, L Donaldson, DONALDSON at primelending.com. So please feel free. I know someone asked where I was. I am in Texas. However, we actually lend in all 50 states. So please reach out to me and I'll make sure that I connect you with a loan officer in your market.
Whoa, all 50 states. That's big. And I think this is the first time that you've made that announcement, guys. So if this is the first time you're hearing this, Prime Lending lends in all 50 states. That's magnificent. And Jay, where are you located?
We're in Phoenix.
Phoenix.
But we have our appraisal management company, which is called Apex, is a nationwide appraisal management company. And I think last month we did like 13,000 appraisals nationwide. Yeah.
Whoa, that's very impressive.
Wow.
And Jay, before we depart, will you tell our audience how an appraiser is contracted?
Yeah, so that was a huge change after the last real estate crash, where it used to be John, the loan officer, could call Fred, the appraiser, and just maybe they're best friends or maybe they're golfing buddies or they, whatever the case may be. And he could hire anybody to do the appraisal. That stopped when the industry bigwigs looked and said, hey, one of the biggest problems we're having is appraisals aren't objective and neutral. And we need to bring back that to the process. So now in pretty much every single case, when there's a lender involved, either the lender has an appraisal desk and the appraisal desk is picking the appraiser, or they're outsourcing the entire process to an appraisal management company. What they want to do is put a firewall between the people that make commissions on deals closing, on loans closing, and the appraisers. And so there's a firewall to make sure that the appraisers don't feel pressured, aren't influenced, and don't have personal relationships with the loan officers on the other side.
There we go. Good deal. Thank you so much for that, Jay. I think that helped our audience out quite a bit. And then oftentimes it'll be up to the discretion of your lender or a conversation between the lender and the buyer on when that appraisal will be ordered. Yeah. So that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, and I just one more thing before, because it seems like we're wrapping up. There is something that's really important that everybody should care about. It's called geographical competency. In my industry, what that means, does the appraiser have the locational expertise necessary to give you an accurate conclusion of value? And one of the biggest problems in my industry is sometimes the appraiser that was picked for the job and is calling you, the listing agent, doesn't know the nuances of the neighborhood. And the number one reason I see an appraisal where I think the conclusion is wrong is because the appraiser didn't understand the nuances of the neighborhood. And maybe they crossed that busy street or crossed that canal or moved over to a different school district to pick comps and got the value wrong. So you really want to spend a few minutes talking to these appraisers over the phone when they're calling for access. And just make sure you feel comfortable, whether it be on a refinance or whether it be on a purchase. Make sure you feel like these appraisers know the market that you're living in.
That is a very good point. That is a very good point, because neighborhoods have nuances. Areas have nuances. I gave the example earlier. Mine is a perfect example of that. In a rural area, you will pass one neighborhood. You have perhaps like a really nice trailer park community. And then, so you have such a mix. And if you send an appraiser out, you're going to get if they don't know the area, you're probably not going to get the result or the value that you're looking for.
Yeah. Be careful on that. Like for me, I like geographically incompetent appraisers to come and appraise my house, because I'm in a fine neighborhood, a decent neighborhood, but I'm right on the border of a really nice neighborhood. And so what I like is appraisers that don't know my community that cross the border to go in that really nice neighborhood, because then they'll appraise my house for a lot more.
It works to your advantage.
Yes.
No, right?
Good deal. Well, guys, we are at the end of speaking with the appraiser today. This is just so much information. He's given us so many tidbits, so much knowledge that we can share with our clients or we can use for the purchase of our new home. We are near the end of our episode, series 2 of Wisdom Wednesday. With our creator, LaTanya Donaldson, myself, and Stephanie. Our very last episode is Meet You at the Closing Table. So we're excited about that one.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this is our last. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stephanie.
No, I'm go ahead.
this is our last episode before Christmas. So I want to say, first of all, to my co host, Jay, thank you so much. Merry, Merry, Merry Christmas. And I'll say to everyone that's out there listening, this has been a difficult year, but also I think it's been a year for us to be so grateful for so many things in our lives. So I wish each and every one of you very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you at the beginning of 2021.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.